It was supposed to be a simple overnight stop, nothing more. I was driving cross-country, making good time, when the fatigue hit me harder than expected. You know that feeling, your eyelids get heavy, and the lines on the road blur together. I had no choice but to pull over. The neon sign of the Sunset Lodge flickered in the distance. It wasn't fancy, definitely no five-star accommodation, but it was close and cheap. That was all I needed. From the moment I stepped into the lobby, something felt off. The woman at the front desk barely looked up from her magazine. She handed me the room key with no words, no smile, not even a standard "enjoy your stay." Just a grunt. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she had a bad day. The room was just as underwhelming as I'd expected: thin carpet, an old boxy TV, and an overpowering stench of cleaning chemicals barely masking something worse. But I was too tired to care. I just needed sleep. The door creaked as I locked it behind me. Then I noticed something strange. The window, facing the parking lot, had no curtains. Just cheap blinds, barely covering the glass, allowing anyone outside to see in if they wanted to. Again, I shrugged it off. What could happen in one night, right? I turned off the lights and lay on the hard, springy mattress. That's when I heard it, something subtle but distinct. A faint scratching sound. At first, I thought it was coming from the walls. Maybe mice? It is a cheap motel, after all. But then, it got louder, like it was right outside the door. I sat up, listening carefully. The noise stopped. My pulse was racing, but I tried to rationalize it, maybe a stray animal or the wind. But then came the knock. Not a polite, gentle knock. It was slow, deliberate, like someone tapping the wood with their knuckles, trying to be just quiet enough not to wake anyone else, but loud enough to get my attention. I froze, barely breathing. No one knew I was here. And the front desk clerk didn't seem like the type to care about a welcome visit. I slid out of bed, trying to stay as quiet as possible, and moved toward the door. The cheap peephole was foggy, but I could make out a figure standing there. Just standing, not moving. My heart was hammering in my chest. I thought about opening the door, maybe it was a guest who got the wrong room. But something in the back of my mind screamed not to. Then, I noticed it, the shadow on the carpet near the door. It was creeping under the door frame. But that didn't make sense. There was no light coming from the hallway. The longer I stared, the darker the shadow grew. That's when I realized it wasn't a shadow from the hallway light. It was a foot. Someone was standing so close to my door that their foot was pressing into the gap beneath it. I stumbled back, reaching for anything I could use as a weapon, my mind racing with panic. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. Of course, this place was too rundown to have reliable service. Then, the doorknob started to rattle. Whoever it was, they were trying to get in. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and held it like a baseball bat, just waiting for the door to swing open. The rattling stopped, but the air in the room felt thick, suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. No footsteps retreating. No more rattling. Just dead silence. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner, gripping that lamp until my knuckles were white, staring at the door. The next morning, I crept out of the room as soon as the sun came up. The parking lot was empty except for my car, and there was no sign of anyone else. When I went to check out, the same woman was at the desk. I asked her if anyone had been knocking on doors the night before. She looked up at me with cold, empty eyes and simply said, "You're the only guest here." I didn't stay to ask any more questions. I threw my bag in the car and drove, vowing never to stop at a roadside motel again.
I've never been one for long drives at night, but sometimes you don't have a choice. I was driving across the Midwest, trying to make it to a small town for a job interview early the next morning. The highway stretched out endlessly, a narrow, dimly lit vein of asphalt cutting through flat fields and dark forests. After hours of staring at the same painted lines and reflectors, my eyelids were starting to droop. I knew I had to stop somewhere, anywhere, or risk dozing off at the wheel. That's when I saw it, a flickering neon sign ahead on the side of the road. Sunset Motel, it read, with a few letters barely glowing. I decided to pull in, even though the place looked like it had seen better days. The parking lot was empty except for a rusted-out truck parked near the office. I parked next to it, stretched my legs, and made my way inside. The reception area was small, with a few cracked vinyl chairs and a dusty coffee machine. Behind the counter, a bored-looking woman in her 50s sat under the yellow glow of a single desk lamp. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and she was tapping a pen against the counter rhythmically, staring at a small TV that was playing some late-night infomercial. I approached the counter, and she didn't look up until I cleared my throat.
Need a room?
She asked, her voice flat and disinterested. Yeah, just for the night, I replied. She slid a grimy guest book over to me and handed me an old-fashioned brass key attached to a large wooden fob with the number 12 etched into it.
Room 12.
She muttered.
Checkouts at 10 a.m.
I thanked her, then asked if she had any water or a vending machine nearby. She just nodded toward the end of the hallway without saying another word. I walked down the hall, the old carpet squishing under my feet, and found a vending machine with only a few options left, mostly snacks that looked like they'd been there for years. Room 12 was at the very end of the hall. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It was about what I expected, a faded floral bedspread on a squeaky bed, a small TV bolted to the wall, and a musty smell that I could almost taste. There was a single window with heavy drapes, drawn shut, and a small wooden chair in the corner. Exhausted, I tossed my bag onto the chair, kicked off my shoes, and lay down on the bed. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner struggling to work, and every few seconds, there was a faint tapping sound, like something hitting against the wall outside. I figured it was probably a loose branch or something, so I ignored it and closed my eyes. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by a noise, a loud thud. It sounded like it came from the room next to mine. I sat up, my heart thumping in my chest, and listened carefully. There was nothing for a moment, just the sound of the air conditioner wheezing, but then I heard it again. Another thud, followed by what sounded like muffled voices. I got up and went to the wall, pressing my ear against it. The voices were faint, but I could make out a man's deep, steady tone. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his voice had a strange calmness to it, like he was trying to soothe someone. There was another voice, too, a woman's. She sounded agitated, her words fast and breathy. I told myself it was probably just a couple arguing. I was about to climb back into bed when I quietly got up and moved toward the door, trying to see through the peephole. But it was so dark on the other side, I couldn't make out anything. I pressed my ear against the wood, and I heard it again, the same calm male voice from earlier, speaking in a low, almost soothing tone. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unsettling, like he was trying to coax someone. Suddenly, the breathing stopped. I stared at the door, unsure of what to do. My instincts were telling me to open it, just to check, but something else, some deep-seated fear, told me to stay put. After a minute or two, the scratching stopped, and I heard soft footsteps moving away. The hallway grew quiet again, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, maybe a stray cat or a guest with a weird habit. I lay back down, pulling the thin blanket over myself, but sleep wouldn't come. I heard the woman again, but this time, she sounded closer, almost like she was right outside my door. I froze, listening intently. A moment later, I heard a soft scratching sound, like fingernails running down the wooden doorframe. And then a soft knock on my door. 3 slow knocks, deliberate and measured. I felt a chill run down my spine. I stayed perfectly still, my hand hovering just above the doorknob. I didn't dare make a sound. After a long moment, the footsteps started up again, moving away from my door, back down the hall. I waited until they faded completely, then slowly exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath again. I didn't sleep much after that. I sat in a chair by the window, trying to keep myself awake. I kept glancing at the clock on the wall, waiting for morning. Just before dawn, I heard another door creak open down the hall, followed by footsteps, a single set this time, moving quickly. I kept staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak and groan of the building. The air in the room felt thick, almost stifling, like I was breathing through a layer of dust. An hour must have passed before I finally heard something else, a door creaking open. I sat up, straining to hear where it was coming from. Then, there was a soft shuffle of footsteps in the hallway, getting closer and closer to my room. They stopped right outside my door. I could hear breathing, heavy, deliberate, like someone was standing there, just inches away. I peeked through the window, parting the curtains just a bit, and saw a tall man in a dark coat walking out of the motel, heading toward the truck in the lot. He was carrying something, a large, lumpy shape wrapped in what looked like a blanket. He opened the truck's back door and tossed the bundle inside like it weighed nothing. Then, he got into the driver's seat and drove off. My heart was racing again. I wanted to convince myself that it was just my imagination running wild, but there was something about the way he moved, the way he had knocked on my door. It didn't feel right. As soon as the sun was up, I grabbed my stuff and headed straight for the front desk. The woman was still there, looking just as bored as before. I told her I was checking out, and as she'd processed the payment, I couldn't help but ask, who was in room 15 last night? She stopped and looked at me, confused.
Room 15?
She repeated, glancing at the keys behind her on the wall.
That room's been vacant for months. No one stayed there.
I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I didn't argue. I just nodded, grabbed my receipt, and left. As I drove away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that man in the truck following me. But the road behind me was empty.
I've always loved camping alone. I find a strange comfort in the quiet isolation of nature, far away from the noise and chaos of everyday life. This particular trip, though, still sends a chill down my spine whenever I think about it. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway in a remote part of the state forest, a chance to clear my head and reconnect with the natural world. I had no idea how close I'd come to, well, I'm still not sure what. I arrived at the trailhead in the late afternoon, loaded up my pack, and set off down the narrow path into the woods. The sun was already starting to dip behind the treetops, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I had a specific campsite in mind, a small clearing by a creek about 5 miles in, a spot I'd discovered during a hike months before. As I walked, I felt that familiar peace settling over me. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, the distant call of a bird, I breathed it all in, letting the stress of daily life slip away. After about 2 hours, I reached the clearing. The spot looked exactly as I remembered it, serene, untouched, perfect. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and started a small campfire to cook dinner. The sun was almost gone now, the sky a deep purple fading into black. I remember feeling content, staring into the flickering flames as I ate. The sounds of the forest around me grew louder with the darkness. I heard crickets chirping, the faint hoot of an owl, the gurgle of the creek nearby. That's when I first heard it, a distinct rustling in the bushes behind my tent. It was too heavy to be a small animal, more like a person walking slowly through the undergrowth. I paused, listening. The rustling stopped. I shook it off. It was probably a deer, maybe a raccoon. I went back to my meal, but I couldn't shake that uneasy feeling, that prickling sensation on the back of my neck. After dinner, I doused the fire and crawled into my tent. The night was pitch black now, with no moon to light up the surroundings. I could hear the creek gurgling softly nearby, the breeze rustling through the trees. I lay there for a while, just listening, my ears straining for any unusual sounds. But there was nothing, just the usual noises of the forest at night. I must have drifted off at some point, but I woke up suddenly, not sure why. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt that familiar, inexplicable sense of dread. I lay there, perfectly still, listening. That's when I heard it again, soft, deliberate footsteps just outside my tent. They were slow, unhurried, almost like someone was circling, trying not to be heard. I held my breath, my mind racing. It had to be a deer or some other animal, right? But the footsteps were too deliberate. I glanced at my phone. It was a little after 2 a.m. I listened, every muscle in my body tensed, waiting for something to happen. The footsteps stopped. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe it had just been my imagination, or maybe whatever it was had moved on. I lay back down, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But then, I heard a soft whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it again, closer this time. It was definitely a whisper, but I couldn't make out the words. My blood ran cold. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing with possibilities. Was it some kind of prank? Was someone out there watching me? The whispering continued, getting closer and more urgent. I reached for my flashlight with trembling hands and clicked it on. I unzipped the tent just enough to poke my head out, shining the light into the darkness. The beam cut through the night, illuminating the trees around me, but I saw nothing, no figures, no movement. The whispering stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence, the beam of my flashlight sweeping back and forth through the trees. Then I heard it again, the same whisper, but this time from the opposite direction. My heart was in my throat. I knew then that this wasn't an animal, and it wasn't the wind. Someone, or something, was out there, and they were moving. I pulled back into my tent, zipped it up, and sat there in the darkness, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. I tried to think of what to do. Should I pack up and leave? But the trail back to my car was long, and navigating it in the dark wasn't safe. I could wait until dawn. It couldn't be more than a few hours away. But as I sat there, I heard the footsteps again, closer this time, and slower. Then I heard something else, a soft scraping sound, like metal against fabric. I realized with a jolt that it was coming from the side of my tent. My mind went blank with fear. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. The scraping stopped, and then, a low chuckle, right outside my tent. A man's voice, soft, almost amused. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. My heart stopped. I fumbled for my knife, my hand shaking so badly I could barely grip it. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer. Just the sound of footsteps, retreating now, fading into the darkness. I sat there, knife in hand, flashlight off, waiting. Minutes passed, then hours. The footsteps didn't return, and the forest gradually grew quiet again. I didn't sleep at all that night. As soon as the first light of dawn broke, I packed up my tent as quickly as I could and started back down the trail. I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling eyes on me the entire way back to my car. When I finally reached the trailhead, I felt a surge of relief so strong I nearly collapsed. I drove straight home and didn't stop until I was miles away from those woods. To this day, I have no idea who or what was out there with me that night. I've thought about it a lot, replayed every sound, every whisper. Maybe it was some sick prank, or maybe it was someone far more dangerous. Either way, I haven't camped alone since. And I don't think I ever will again.